Disinformation and misinformation are emerging as major threats to Africa's democratic process, with digital platforms increasingly used to influence public perception. To address this, the ECOWAS network of electoral commissions, ECONEC, and the International Institute for Democracy and Electoral Assistance, International IDEA, convened a regional workshop in Abuja. The goal? To protect elections and reinforce public trust in the process. The workshop brought together election management bodies from across West Africa, including Nigeria, Ghana, Sierra Leone, Liberia, and the Gambia, to share strategies, strengthen cooperation, and safeguard the credibility of elections. Organizers stressed that today, elections are not decided solely at the ballot box, but also in the information space. Cyberattacks, disinformation, and digital manipulation are now among the most pressing threats to electoral integrity. Also joining us on the news to discuss more on this is the Senior Advisor, International IDEA, Olufunto Akinduro. Thank you so much for joining us, Olufunto.
Thank you so much for having me.
So we know that some strategies were proposed by the International IDEA and ECONEC to help the election management bodies to curb misinformation and also protect voters. What are these strategies?
Well, I think it's important that we start by saying, there is no one size fits all or a silver bullet, for addressing this. And it's not, something that electoral management bodies can do all by themselves. So in our discussions over the past 2 days, we paid a lot of attention to initiatives around promoting interagency cooperation, working, more with other agencies that also have a mandate on regulating the information environment. We also considered strategies around proactive disclosure of information by election management bodies, and because that is clearly one way of being one step ahead of disinformation. It's about putting information out proactively and also planning proactively in a longer term around how to address the information environment. Finally, we looked at questions around advocacy for legal reforms. But important to mention that legal reforms should also be considered in because we do not hope to go from an open information environment to suddenly a completely closed out environment. And then questions around different channels by which we could counter disinformation, in a way that it matches as well the efforts of the peddlers of disinformation. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Also, how would you say that the spread of false narratives and digital manipulation has affected election credibility across Africa so far?
Most recently, I think if you look at elections held in the past 8 to 10 years, the impact of disinformation, is quite clear. And it's important to, understand the relevance of the information environment, information integrity being central to achieving election integrity. These are not separate. Considering that elections are keenly contested, elections come through with a lot of tensions, passions, emotions, and elections are really pretty much about perceptions. So a well-informed electorate, understanding the processes, the procedures, and being able to take informed decisions for those processes are quite keen. So when you look at elections that have happened, across the continent, I think particularly Kenya and Nigeria have been, clearly identified as two countries that have been quite impacted by questions around disinformation and, just the impact of the online information environment. And we've seen, questions around attacks on officials of election management bodies, attacks on candidates, and especially attacks that affect women in the political arena quite specifically because of how they are profiled and perceived, in the online environment. We've also seen outbreak of violence being, reactions to wrong information as provided or as taken up or perceived by the electorate in some countries. We've also seen just wrong information about the process, people peddling results that are not official, people peddling information about the process, things like you saying people should vote on a certain day, which is not the real day. And then it begins to affect, voter turnout, acceptance of results overall, and, questions around the credibility of incoming regimes. Lastly, you also think about the reputation of election management bodies, after these kinds of wrong information, had been sent out broadly, and it's had to, roll it back, and the impact of it in the overall acceptance of election management bodies.
All right, Senior Advisor, International Idea, Olufunto Akinduro, thank you for joining us on the news.